Troy Boisjoli, CEO of ATHA Energy Corp. ATHA Energy is a large-scale uranium exploration company focused in the best jurisdictions in Canada, in Canada's best uranium jurisdictions. Our largest project and our focus is our Angilak Project, which is a large-scale emerging uranium project in Nunavut, Canada.
Right. We got to start with the press release. You obviously put out a bit of news today. Here's the headlines there.
Extremely exciting results. As an explorationist and as an exploration company, these are the type of results that you hope for, Matt, and that you look for. We're seeing very thick grades, or very thick, great thicknesses of mineralization, over 26 meters of continuous mineralization, combined mineralization downhole with 13 meters of continuous with about 1.9 meters of high grade within it. Without getting into like the specifics, Matt, I've spent a lot of years exploring for uranium across the Athabasca Basin. This is an Athabasca style intersection, both in terms of thickness and grade, that we're seeing in the Angikuni Basin.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about how this mineralization style at Rib North compares to, say, known Athabasca Basin hosted deposits, and what's it imply as far as grade and scale is concerned.
Yeah, maybe I'll just pull back to some of my experience. I was fortunate enough to work on a world-class uranium project for a number of years with NexGen Energy, working on the Arrow deposit from maiden resource right through to more advanced stages of feasibility, permitting, etc. The discovery hole at Arrow, I think it was RK1421, very similar grades, very similar thicknesses that we're seeing in the discovery hole at Rib North. I think that's true for the PC East, Patterson Corridor East, which is NexGen's exciting new discovery along the Patterson Corridor. And that's the scale of an intersection that we're seeing here in terms of the radiometric profile. 26 plus meters of mineralization, cumulative downhole. When you start to think about mineralization that's 13 meters thick, continuous, with 1.9 meters of high grade within that, and in particular in the setting that it's at, relative to the unconformity, structurally controlled, high degrees of alteration around it in terms of hematite silicification, some clay alteration, etc. This is part of it, but we're recognizing this as part of an analogous setting to what we see in the Athabasca.
Where's the confidence come from that this isn't just like a isolated pod and it's part of a kind of a significant mineralized zone?
Well, Matt, this is a continuation of the drilling at Rib. We moved into Rib. I'll zoom back out for a second here just to contextualize this. At ATHA, we have full control over the Angikuni Basin. That's a sub-basin to the Athabasca. Sitting right at the edge of that is the LAC 50 system. We had, we've talked about the success we had there last year. We expanded the deposit in all directions. We did 10,000 meters, went 25 for 25 there, wrapped an exploration target around it that shows significant scale potential within that area. In parallel then, we moved into the Angikuni Basin. And the Angikuni Basin being a parallel basin to the Athabasca, defined a 31 kilometer long structural trend that cuts across this thing. And this is our fourth discovery in one single drill program, one exploration program within that Angikuni Basin. We discovered mineralization at KU, at Rib East, at Rib West, and now Rib North. And Rib in particular now has conductive corridors that are mineralized over 12 kilometers, multiple drill holes in each area. We have not missed yet. And importantly, what we're seeing right now with these results today is that we're seeing grades and thicknesses analogous to the Athabasca Basin style mineralization, which was our thesis the whole time. So we like what we see. And in particular, because we're in sole control of an entire uraniferous basin here.
Right. And how do you go about sort of determining sort of the kind of true thicknesses and also the kind of geometry of these mineralized intervals that you talk about?
Yeah. Hey, that's getting into some technical details there, but we have a highly experienced team working on this that understands uranium exploration, uranium deposits in detail. Cliff Revering, our vice president of exploration, is a guy that I consider one of the best in the business, formerly chief geologist at Cameco's Cigar Lake operation. We know uranium. it starts off with radiometric profiles, synth data, etc., to give you early confirmation and an indication of grade and thickness, which we released today. Downhole, you're looking at oriented core data. You're looking at a multidiscipline technical team that is advancing the technical understanding of this project rapidly through the course of the year.
Okay, so that kind of component in terms of the potential scale, so comps to ATHA. What about grade? Obviously, you took up this high grade interval of like 55, 56,000 CPS. When you look at the kind of historic Angilak assay database, I mean, how's that compare? How's it compare to ATHA? How are you feeling about that?
Yeah, we like the radiometric profile. We really like the radiometric profile. I'll give you a couple benchmarks here. Okay, so we're using a triple gamma probe, which is a shielded probe, which is intended to accurately reflect high grade intervals. Okay, and so you look at 50,000 counts, that range, definitely in that high grade spectrum of the radiometric profile. One of the common communicated tools that's used to communicate radiometrics would be a handheld scintillometer. People often talk about off scale or 64,000 counts as being off scale. We're seeing multiple peaks in this hole of greater than 64,000 counts. So off scale, visible mineralization, strong visible mineralization localized in veins and localized within, the extensional structures within this hole. So we like the system.
I mean, you've referenced there. You said that you're sort of in the middle of nowhere. You're out there on your own. You've got this basin to yourself for now. In terms of that sort of targeting towards or vectoring towards these higher grade cores, are you seeing any sort of zonation of alterations, your chemical signatures, or what's going to help you?
Yeah, what we're seeing is we employed we employed a new inversion technique on top of our geophysics. So we've got an MMT data set. We deployed a structurally bound or structurally controlled inversion process, which allowed us to target very, very accurately along this conductive corridor. In terms of the underlying geology, that we're seeing large-scale graphitic fault zones. We're seeing large-scale oxidized alteration, significant amount of hematite moving around, the right geochemistry, the right redox state to localize large-scale uranium deposits. And moreover, just from a bulk scale perspective, Matt, we're seeing mineralization over 12 kilometers of strike length with the holes that we have tested. And we have not missed yet. And when you think about that from an exploration perspective, that's a bit hard to get your head around because it's very, very uncommon. I've not seen a project like this through my time in the uranium space. And to think about holes that are drilled 1.4 kilometers away from the nearest closest hole and to hit 26 meters of mineralization in that hole is exceptional, because you aren't going to see, from my experience, you don't intersect your thickest, highest grade hole with one hole in the middle of nowhere. And so that has us really excited about this system overall in the rib area, and the potential to build out additional mineralization around it with grades and thicknesses like we're recognizing now.
Well, you talk about that kind of 12-kilometer corridor, obviously, and you've been doing work at Rib South and West. Do you think this is one continuous corridor, or is it kind of multiple mineralized systems that you're looking at?
Yeah, what we see right now, what we see right now is this is a large-scale dilational structure that goes right across the Angikuni Basin. So it goes from Rib, and if we look at a map, it goes all the way across to 9 Iron. That's 31 kilometers across. Okay, we're dealing with the Rib area, which is a short segment of that large-scale conductor. Okay, and so structurally, Rib East, Rib West, Rib North, they're all part of a large-scale structural corridor that rips across this area, and they're mineralized on multiple conductive planes or multiple structures within that larger scale structural corridor. So yeah, I think they're linked. I think they're related. I think they're tied together very well structurally, as evidenced by the geophysics that we've done, the structural geology that we've done, and the drill hole data to date.
Right, and I think the other thing that struck me is a little bit from the last conversation, and maybe in this press release as well. You talk about this the step outs. They're quite aggressive, right?
they're very aggressive, and for good reason. The reason they're aggressive is that our intention is to outline the scale that we see here on this system. We aren't outlining that scale by 15 or 20 meter step outs. They're 150 meter to 1.5 kilometer step outs. And so we're stepping out aggressively. What has given us the confidence to be able to do that has been the technical work and the buildup of the modeling work that the team has done across multiple disciplines, across geophysics, across structural geology, and geochemistry. And fortunately, we've been able to isolate these exploration targets with a high degree of precision. And as a function of that, we've had a 100% success rate.
And what's the role of the kind of EM inversion models that in all of this?
The EM inversion model, and you'll see it as a backdrop to one of the maps in the press release. It's a figure in the background there. It has given us call it a high precision model, geophysical model, which has guided our targeting. We've been able to intersect that with drilling and reconcile the core back to the model very, very accurately, what that does is it gives us a degree of control over our exploration drilling. So we have a high degree of confidence that when we are targeting a structure, that we are actually going to be able to intersect that structure where we think we're going to be able to intersect it. And the correlation between that model and mineralization has been very, very strong within the rib area. So when you see that model going from the historic rib area through rib west, across the north, and back down rib east into the south, we have a high degree of confidence that those are graphitic structural corridors. And everywhere that we've drilled along that graphitic structural corridor, we've hit mineralization.
Right. Okay. So in terms of like kind of structural mapping, it's kind of helping you refine your drill targeting, right? That's the point of all of this.
The point, yeah.
Okay.
To pull it back to high level, that's the exact point.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So in which case, how does that, or how does all of this? I mean, effectively four discoveries, right? In a short period of time, and you're building on that thing, which I think people bought into initially when you kind of picked up Angilak. People are going, you've got this historic resource. It's whatever it's 47 million pounds sort of thing. How do you build on that thing? How do you move it forward? So have you been sort of thinking about how you think about Angilak compared to LAC 50? I mean, or is this just early days for you?
Yeah, how we're thinking about it. Quite clearly is how do we, understanding the total scale potential that we're dealing with here. This is a very, we bought latitude for Angilak. We bought Angilak because we had a view that this was a project that had top tier exploration scale and resource potential scale. That's why we bought it, and that's what we've been focused on and delivered on over the last 2.5 or program and a half since we acquired it. That you look at being in sole control of the Angikuni Basin, this sub-basin that has had, we have the opportunity to do first pass exploration on. This is a project with a very high uranium metal endowment, as demonstrated by the work around LAC 50, as demonstrated by the work on the Rib 9 iron trend. We're in sole control of it, and I view it as being analogous to exploring in the northeast Athabasca Basin circa 1965. And the reason I say 1965 is the Rabbit Lake discovery was made in 68. So pre-major discoveries, we have the opportunity and the ability to be executing on a project that has tremendous scale potential at a time in the uranium sector when the supply side is the vast majority of the risk is on the supply side, and there's supply side uncertainty here.
Well, yeah, maybe we can talk a little bit about the market in a second off the back of the WNA a couple of weeks ago. But look, you're kind of tracing uranium mineralization on the eastern limb, the western limb, 4 kilometers either way, and you're starting to demonstrate that district scale. But do you feel under any pressure to start defining maiden resources, maybe in Rib North or anywhere else, to kind of put a marker in the sand, as it were, or is the priority all about discovery drilling?
No, it's not all about discovery drilling. As a staged approach here. last year we de-risked LAC 50. Okay, known deposit there. We expanded out, it stepped out significantly from LAC 50, identified unique scale opportunity, if you want to call it tier one scale opportunity within the LAC 50 deposit area itself. We stepped into the Angikuni Basin this year for good reason, and the reason was to be able to demonstrate what we saw in the data, which was the district scale or camp scale potential. Now having outlined that, we have tremendous optionality in our portfolio for which one of these areas we start to move and drive forward, because the objective here is not exploration for the sake of exploration. It's exploration for discovery's sake, to move projects forward to be extremely relevant in this cycle.
Right. Okay. Well, you've just to that point, you've raised a bit of money recently, and you're going to have to sort of, I guess, help people by defining some kind of resource definition with that. So, how does that happen? What do you spend your money on to get to that point?
Yeah, that's more moving forward into next year. We've obviously got more results to come this year. Assays to be coming back from the drilling that we put out. It's all been preliminary. It's all been, pardon me, not preliminary, but it's been radiometric data, as is common in our space. Assays will follow. From there, expect a work plan to be outlined and defined based off all the data in hand for 2026. 2026, our intention is to move these projects forward in earnest, and not be, with an allocation of dollars between advancing deposits and exploration, with a smaller amount on exploration. The large percentage of the focus from a strategic perspective now is about moving projects forward.
Okay, and that'll presumably start to include some sort of infill drilling, or not? How do you view the drilling component?
Yeah, from a drilling perspective next year, moving into delineation, infill, etc., project advancement is a natural progression based off of where we're at. I will caveat that right now, Matt, with based off of the results from the rib area. If you would have asked me 2 months ago where we would be spending those project development dollars in the subsequent phases of work, I would have said unequivocally LAC 50. With the scale that we're seeing and the grades that we're seeing within the rib area, we need assays back, we need the modeling done, and we've got a great kind of option analysis to be able to do to figure out what is the optimal deposit within this project area to advance forward.
Okay, so you're, I guess, reserving the right to think about capital allocation next year.
100%.
Okay.
And the reason we're doing that is the scale that we see that has been outlined at rib right now, with the grades that we're seeing, radiometric profiles that we're seeing, and the thicknesses that we're seeing. We've got mineralization over 12 kilometers. We're seeing we're seeing very good grades, very good thicknesses from the radiometric data in the hole that we produced today. And so that outlines a scale at rib that is on par, if not more significant than what we see even at LAC 50, albeit early stages.
Right. Okay. Let's talk about a couple of weeks ago, WNA, the World Nuclear Association Symposium in London, and I guess also more recently at Beaver Creek just over a week ago. You had the chance to sort of sit down in front of a breadth and range of investors looking into the space. So it's far from cliched. It's far from cliched. A lot of new money looking in, with lots of opinions and lots of learning to do, and of course the old guard as well. What were your kind of thoughts about the market at the moment?
Yeah, maybe decoupling market right now from macro for a second. The macro environment in the uranium sector is unequivocally unlike any time I've seen in my career. The sentiment, the real demand that's being built up, coupled with some of the supply side risk, is a structural setup like we have not seen in the uranium space. Okay, then from a market perspective, Cameco again is, you look at the top end of the sector, catching a bid, performing very well. I think, almost on a daily basis, testing all-time highs again with Cameco. NexGen approaching those levels again. Where we see ourselves, and where we fit within, in my opinion, within this general market, is as this thing continues to progress, as people start to look for additional alpha kind of down cap opportunities, growth opportunities, etc., that field gets very narrow, Mark. As you're aware, you go below a certain market cap, and there are very, very few companies that are working on exciting uranium projects. And across that space, we're a group that not only are having discovery success and results off the drill, but from a unique perspective, we're in control of an entire district. We're in control of an entire sub-basin of the Athabasca. So we like where we're positioned from a market perspective as well.
And do people understand, where you're at? Like I say, you're kind of like, I've referenced it internally here, you're the kind of sole tenant of this a generous basin, giving you grade and starting to show scale potential. Do people see that as an advantage or a disadvantage? I mean, what's their expectations in terms of your business plan? Do they expect you to do JVs or just fund this yourselves? I mean,
no, I think what people recognize and realize is at this stage in a market, being in control of a district like we're in, has us in a very good position of strength. Has us in a position of strength relative to the market and relative to our strategic opportunities, and the availability to advance this forward in a timeline that is relevant to this uranium cycle.
Interesting times, sir. Well, look, anyway, I appreciate you picking up the phone with regards to this announcement. I mean, you keep hitting, as you say. Yeah. You keep hitting here. It's very generous and giving sets of deposits that you've got. So like, stay in touch. Let us know how you get on. Be interested to see how these kind of grades improve, and more importantly, I guess, what you do with this money. So appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks, Matt.